I've already indicated one of the things that marks off the postmodern, or the postmodern situation from what might be called a modern situation, is the televisual, telecommunicational network and the saturation of modes of information, surveillance, and control at a level and intensity where the quantity of them qualitatively changes the nature of our experience. That the very quantity of information, the very quantity of the images and their global scope, television, ubiquitous, and so on, that their very quantitative enhancement has changed our situation in dramatic ways. One way to think of the 19th century is to think of the massive forces of production, like steam, power, the factory, railways, and all of those massive new forces of production in the 19th century. One of their primary things that they were directed at was replacing manual labor with mechanical labor. If we look at the 19th century that way, as that being at least one of the big stories, then certainly one of the big stories of the mid to late 20th century would be the incredible increase in the switch from technologies which concentrate on increasing the intensity and the power of manual labor to those which tend to replace mental, intellectual labor. By that I mean not just computers, but the whole array of devices intended to replace, for lack of a better word, human experience. Subjective human experience. Television is an instrument of production, in my opinion, functioning to replace, largely, subjective human experience. Computers, designed sometimes for the direct technical function of replacing intellectual experience. In other words, things like adding, multiplying, dividing, subtracting. Really difficult now to get a child in the second or third grade to bother to learn to do that, and for obvious reasons. They have 3 keys they know how to punch. Why should they do that with their minds? Why waste that labor? I mean, it'd be like asking you in the early 19th century to knock over a mountain and forget those new steam drills. This replacement, however, of, as it were, the other part of the human equation, if we think of the human equation as being something about humans as embodied and then humans as intelligent and subjective and rational, then we will see that, as it were, the advance of society has tended to replace both the human attributes that belong to mechanical skills, manual skills, as well as to intellectual skills. One of the reasons we value sport so much now is that the replacement of the laboring body required for the development of our society can be vicariously enjoyed when we see Michael Jordan dunk, and we remember quasi-nostalgically the beauty and the pleasures of the body, although of course now deferred into an image, because the secret of a postmodern society is that everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation or an image. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation or an image. Gibson begins his novel, Neuromancer, with the following sentence, and I consider it the best first sentence in 20th century American literature. The sky above the port was the color of television, tuned to a dead channel. The fights that remain, the living antagonisms in our possibilities to construct ourselves in anything like free and autonomous ways, will have to be fought across that barren, strange landscape, that unthinkable cultural future of deferred and indifferent pseudo-experience. And across that terrain, the struggles for even moments of authentic lived experience, authentic in quotes, who knows, of lived experience, to feel something, for God's sakes, anything, will be the locus of struggle and of action, we can hope. Here I will call to your mind a scene from Blade Runner, where before the replicant dies, Roy Batty, he slams his hand on a nail. And many of you may not know this, but when Batty does that in the film, it's a reference to an action that Sartre has a character perform in Roads to Freedom. In Roads to Freedom, the Sartre character slams his hand onto a nail to prove that he's free, because he chose to do it. It hurt like hell, but he chose it. Oh, I put my hand on that nail, and that shows I'm free, because just a calculus of deterministic pleasure, I would never have done it. So it's a philosophical demonstration, a painful and stupid one, in my opinion. But by the time we get to Blade Runner, the replicant slams his hand onto a nail just to feel anything. Just to feel anything. So don't worry about the communist or the capitalist. Fight to feel and live anything